If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Oh, welcome to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We have some topics for everybody tonight. You know, we call them the timeless topics, right? Because what we're going to be talking about tonight is not anything that is dire from the week before.
No current events,
no current events of sorts, right? You know, and it's good to do one of these episodes every once in a while, because if we don't actually sit down and look at things outside of just what's happening, all we do is sound like everybody else. And so we have 3 topics tonight that we thought would be fun to run through. But, you know, I guess to begin the show off, you know, let's talk a little bit about our personal life, right? You know, there's a lot of things going on in both in our lives. A lot of Facebook posts. You know, we're trying to get back into Instagram and Twitter. It's just a very hard avenue. And our friend Boyce over at Mindful Skeptics.
He'll be so pissed when he hears us.
Mindful Skeptics. He was challenging us to use the Instagram video a little bit more often. And so I think we need to get into that a little bit more, where we scream at the camera as we're driving 90 miles an hour down the road on our way home.
I refuse to do seatbelt car angry videos. I refuse to do it. I refuse to look like Joshua Feuerstein. I refuse. I'll do little videos. I won't do the walking down a path with my phone. I won't do walking around my house on a windy day so my mic sounds like crap, and I won't do the car angry video. If we do some videos, little things like that or whatever, I'll do something, but I'm not going to do any of those 3 because everyone does those and they drive me nuts. I don't know why. It's just one of those pet peeve things. We're just like, this isn't Blair Witch. Stop the shaky cam, sit down and talk into the microphone.
Well, and that kind of reminds me, my daughter had a concert, I don't know, at her school a while ago, and we go to it, and we're there. We got there early because 2 years ago, my other daughter was in a similar show, and it was packed, and we had to stand. So we got there early so we could sit down, and we're sitting there. And then I was like, man, I really want to record this. And so, you know, I get up, I give my chair to somebody else, and I'm recording it. You know, I'm standing by the back wall recording. I'm sitting here going, man, you know, Johnny used to have that selfie stick, and I used to make fun of him all the time. But right now, I could be sitting in my seat with a selfie stick because nobody's behind me videotaping this, and it would look a lot better than my shaky hands. You know, here's my hands, and then because when you zoom in on your camera, everything gets shakier. So I'm sitting here videotaping, going, I wish I had a selfie stick. Damn it, I don't want to buy one because I don't want to look like that hipster douchebag. But I really need a selfie stick for concerts and things like that because I'm lazy and I must not have enough upper arm strength to keep the camera still enough to not make people seasick.
I don't know if having the camera on a long pole would help with the shakiness, because if your hand moves let's say a quarter of an inch, that pole weight out there on the end means the camera's going to move like an inch and a half. So that length of your arm extension might make it a little bit more shakier. And if you zoom in, it'll be even worse. So just physics is against you on that one. But those cameras nowadays have like a self-stabilizing ability built into them, and so that you can crop the video and pick your point for stabilization, and it might be able to help you out a little bit that way. But other than that, the selfie stick thing has been hilarious. I don't know if you've seen it. Another girl died last week selfieing on a cliff.
No.
Have you heard?
No.
Apparently, there's like an epidemic all over the world of people insta selfieing and falling over cliffs and falling into canyons and dying. And there's a bunch of places where they have signs up with like no selfies allowed. Like picturesque rocky cliffs where people go to like take wedding photos and kiss each other on the cheeks. They're falling over the edges because they want to get the perfect selfie. It was like 250, 300 people. They said, I saw a stat that said that selfies on cliffs are more dangerous than sharks now. Like, my wife and I were laughing at it, and she sent me one today. She said another one bites the dust, or another one dies because there's another deadly selfie or whatever it was. And it was a girl. She fell 100 feet off the edge of a cliff and taking a selfie. And it was like, the only thing I could think of was either the Darwin Awards. Just like, I mean, that's the whole point, right? Evolution is trying to remove gene pool. But the selfie stick is a dangerous thing. I don't recommend it because it might take you down a bad path, my friend. It might take you.
I might be that guy that's like walking around with it, like with my dogs on a leash, like, hey, look at me, I'm walking my dogs. You know, it'll be like, we'll be like,
everybody applaud me.
Yeah. That or I'll do it as a mockery thing, and we can put a hashtag to it. We'll put it on our Instagram, like, dumbass walks dog with selfie stick, or something trendy. That's too long to be trendy. But we'll find something trendy and we'll post it out there. And then you got to do it too. I'm going to buy you one too, just so you can have one.
Well, maybe we won't have to do anything like that. Maybe I can just walk around talking on the phone, but just having my phone connected to my hearing aid, so there's no Bluetooth or anything. So people really do think I'm just a crazy person walking around having a full-fledged conversation. Because the looks that I get they're enjoyable.
That's crazy. You know, okay, we have that at work. We have this they redesigned our corporate office, and we have this open air concept, right? You know, so there's desk clusters and everything. And because we don't have offices or much shielding anymore, and the worst is I'll put my headphones in because I don't want to listen to people chatter. And some people are on the phone because, you know, we have to make sales and different things like that. I don't, but other people do. So like I'll be on my phone and I'll get annoyed and I'll be trying to work on a project and I'll stick my headphones in. And like the other day, my boss walked behind me and said, like, had a whole conversation with me with my back turned. Now you'd think he would figure this out, but
if there's no head movement in the general acknowledgement that they are behind you,
there
then
was head movement. I was bopping to my music.
Oh, good Lord.
And he like told me this whole thing, walked away, turned back around to tell me something else, and then realized I didn't even acknowledge him. And so he taps me on the shoulder, and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? And he's like, did you even hear what I said? And I was like,
no. Yes, I heard everything.
Yeah, you said you're giving me a raise, right? And he's like, that's not funny. And I was like, well, I thought it was, but no, you should. When you should have
said, I'll get you the TPS reports by Friday.
That's a good one. I'm going to start using that. And I was like, you should have tapped me on the shoulder when you walked by me. He's like, I thought you were listening to me. You were nodding your head at me. I was like, but Kurt, have I ever not looked at you and talked to you? No. Okay, well, that should be an indication that I'm not paying attention. But I'll annoy other people in the office too, because what'll happen is I'll get on my phone, and we have those adjustable desks, right? Which is awesome because
so you can stand or sit.
I can stand or sit. So every half hour, I'm like standing up, and then I'll be like, I'm getting bored, so I'm going to sit back down. But the whole time, I'm either drumming my fingers on the desk because either I'm listening. Sometimes I'll be listening to death metal, and like when I listen to death metal, I always drum my fingers. It's a bad habit. But then if I'm listening to punk music, it's my feet that go, or like ska music. Or, you know, like Irish music, you know, like I'll listen to Floggy Molly and I'll be jamming out and my feet will be going. And the other day I was doing that and didn't realize it. Like I don't realize it because I get in the zone. And all of a sudden my album ends on my Apple Music, right? And there's nothing going. And all of a sudden the lady across from me, I can hear her and she goes, yeah, I don't know what's going on in that headset over there, but I could tell you whatever music he's drumming his feet to, I can hear my own version of it in my head, and I'm tempted to do the same thing. The lady next to her is like, maybe if we all drum our feet, he'll realize that he's being annoying and stop. And like I pull my headphones out, I was like, I can hear you. And they're like,
oh man,
oh, we don't mean you're annoying, but you're kind of loud right now. And I was like, hey, next time, throw something at me and just say, hey, you're being too loud with your feet. I'm okay with that. I can't, I'm not self-aware, I guess.
It's like what people do. There are people who wear headphones when they're walking around or doing stuff, and they don't put music on or plug it in or anything. They just don't want people to talk to them. So
that's not me.
No, okay. Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like some people do that. They'll put earbuds in, like while they're like traveling on the train to work in the morning or something, just because they don't want people to talk to them. So they'll be like, "Oh, you can't." I've heard of people doing that. It's just like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I put my earbuds in. Like with me, like you don't know that I'm either listening to something because my hearing aids they don't light up and tell you that I'm like streaming live or something. So like there's no Bluetooth thing in my ear, so my hearing aids are connected to my phone, playing podcasts, playing whatever, and it's awesome. I mean, it's wonderful, but like there is no indicator whether or not I'm on the phone or not. So my dad will come walking over to me when I'm in front of a machine or I'm standing by my desk, and he'll be like, "Yeah," and I'm talking to someone, but he has no idea what's going on, and then I'll look at him and I'll point to my ears, and he realizes I'm on the phone. And so, like, I don't know. It's an interesting experience when like with the Bluetooth, those have lights on them or something, so people can like make a 50-50 guess. But people can't even tell on my hearing aids or in my head sometimes. These are pretty discreet, and it's just I've had looks where it's just like, is that a crazy person? Because I'll be walking through like Meijer, talking to my dad on the phone about tolerancing on a project while I'm grabbing stuff for the shop for lunch. So like it's just I think it would be fun to have like someone following behind me, like recording people's reaction to the guy who's walking through Meijer saying, "Listen, it's got to be a 1/4-20 thread and it can't have any relief in it." And people are like, "What the hell did I just walk past?"
Well, and that kind of reminds me of there's a Portlandia. Have you ever watched that show Portlandia?
I have here and there. I haven't sat down through the whole thing, but I understand the basic concept and premise. You know, like the dry hipster take on a lot of stuff. So
you should watch the season 8. So I haven't watched them all either. Technically I'm only on season 2. You know, I watch episodes here and there because they're funny or they're filler episodes. And
I watch ones that are recommended to me. It's not particularly my style of humor, but some of them are. It's like people are like, "You would like this," and then I'll check it out, and then I usually do.
But I watched that with my son the other night, and like I'm watching the show, right? And you know, he's chuckling a little bit, and I'm just laughing my ass off. And it's basically like this band called Riot Spray or whatever, and it's like this old school punk band where this guy's like, "Screw the government. You guys have all sold out," and they got Henry Rollins on it, man. Like, and at first I was like, "Who's that guy? I know that guy. Oh, that's Henry Rollins," and it's hilarious.
That's Uncle Hank.
He's like, "Yeah, man, can I get some herbal tea?" He's like, "No, you don't want whiskey or beer or anything." He's like, "No, I need some herbal tea if I'm gonna have to sing like this. Like, my voice sounds like gravel, and I don't like it, and I would like some tea." And he's like, "Oh, damn it." You know, he like has to go get
Henry Rollins is straight laced. He doesn't drink or smoke or anything. Like that's always one of the things that people have always been like, "Really?" Yeah, he's a super health nut. Like when he's always been straight laced. He doesn't like drinking or smoking or anything.
He's straight edge. That's what they call it.
Straight edge,
It's
straight edge.
I didn't know this was the thing, but it is. There's like whole bands that are straight edge. Actually, last month I saw a band called Harm's Way that was straight edge, and like I didn't understand what it was. Like I understand there was people that do abstain from that, and usually like I thought it was a Christian thing, but I guess it's not. I guess straight edge is not a Christian thing. I thought that's what that was, right? But this
they used to do it all the time at Skeletones downtown GR.
Well, yeah, I was never sober there though. Yeah. We just party in the parking lot before we went. But you know, I love that place. That was the best place ever. But but this band, this dude comes on, right? And like this, I listened to the music, you know, the week before, and they were awesome. Like extremely heavy deathcore, like very, very aggressive, awesome music. And this guy gets up there, and this dude's ripped. I mean, I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
Like bodybuilder.
He looked like
ripped.
Henry did when he was finishing up the Rollins band. He was huge. I saw the picture that you had. Was that Joe?
Yeah, that's my buddy Joe. Yeah. Yes. And like, I was like, holy crap. Like, this dude is just like huge. Like, he gets on the stage. I was like, I wonder if he's going to take his shirt off. And yeah, after the first song, boop, shirt comes off. We're like, oh, shit. And like, he's even more ripped than I thought he was. And like, I really just wanted to go to him and be like, is your ability to abstain from drugs and alcohol, do you just like go work out all the time? Is that like a thing, man? Like, is that how you counter your urges, is by going and working out? I don't know. I don't even know how you get that big. That's insane to me. Like,
to get that big, you have
dedication.
to not have all the other stuff in your system. Like,
and he's a teacher. He's a substitute teacher too. On top of that, isn't that crazy?
Nobody f's with that sub teacher.
He's the that guy
guy's
that
got
comes
a full like he has like a full eagle chest tattoo. He is a monster. Like, people are like, we're gonna mess with the substitute teacher on Thursday. No, you're not, because he'll put you in the pencil sharpener.
Yeah, he's the guy. He's the teacher that walks in, with a dress shirt, and like the students get a little wiry. He's like, all right. He unbuttons it and takes his shirt off, and then like goes after them. Like, seriously, look at me, bro. You want a piece of this? Is that how that's gonna go?
He gets angry, and a button shoots off the front of his shirt. Like his pecs are like going nuts. Ugh. Oh man! Now there was a movie called The Substitute. I don't know if you remember that show. Is
that the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
No. This was Tom Berenger. This is an old school series. This was kind of like if the movie 187 with Sam Jackson.
Samuel
was
Jackson.
Kind of was 187 was the name of it. And this is kind of that based like that, but instead of Sam being like a gang lord, a good guy who got he turned bad. This is like this guy was like a substitute cop. Like, he was an old cop who started teaching and just starts like carrying guns and killing. I mean, this is I want to say 80 something, 1996, and there was a whole bunch of sequels to it. But like, that's the same kind of thing. It's like Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds, when she was like, I'm gonna go in and save everybody, make everybody better. And like, the hip teacher, this guy was like, you're an asshole, I'm gonna shoot you in recess. like that's kind of how it was. I don't know, like when you mentioned like that guy being like the substitute teacher, it brings back that Tom Berenger thing where he's just like I'm picking out the guys and I'm gonna kill in the alleyway because they're gangbangers in school or something like that. Like, I just so anyway, so that show, the guy was ripped as straight edge. Henry Rollins is the same way. So I don't know, that's cool stuff though. I don't personally, but when I was doing major bodybuilding, like, never like bodybuilding to be a bodybuilder, but like trying to gain mass and weight and strength, the regimen that you have to be on to gain weight, like and I was a hard gainer, which meant that my metabolism, it was and still is really high. You have to work really hard to gain mass. And so you couldn't drink and party on Friday night because you would feel like shit all day Saturday, and you wouldn't work out, you wouldn't eat the right foods, you wouldn't do your supplements. It's like you lose a whole day of working out and regimen. So like, if you want to be big and huge, like, you sacrifice, those things so that you can get it, because it's a full-time job. Like, I used to do 5 or 6 supplements a day, like big fat shakes and different kinds of protein each part of the day. It's a huge deal if you want to be that big. And that guy was ripped. So like, you do all the mass gainer stuff, and then you work out and you eat lean chicken and all that kind of stuff to drop all your body fat so that your muscle gets toned. And that's how you get like that. It just, my body's too small to do that. You got to start with a solid mass. And I saw that picture. I was like, man, that guy's crazy huge. But he wasn't super tall.
Nope, he's not. He's actually a really nice guy. And they were very appreciative of us. So I don't know. It's a different
That's
lifestyle.
Fun.
Like, I guess like I could give up drinking, I think, maybe, as long as I can smoke weed all the time. That's all. Like, I don't think I could give up both. I would be a very ornery person, I think. Like, it's kind of like my ex-wife, she had an uncle, and he was an ex-alcoholic. And at all the family gatherings, like, none of that family stopped drinking around him, and I thought they would. But this guy, he would bring a 2-liter of Diet Coke with him, at least one, if not two, and he drank straight out of the 2-liter. Like, he didn't share. You couldn't don't touch his 2-liter. He didn't pour it on ice. He just drank it straight out of there. And you were like, damn, that's hardcore, man.
I know a kid that he got like 4 DUIs before he was like 23, and he doesn't drink at all anymore. Completely quit, completely done. But he drinks like energy drinks. Like when we would go out and party, he would get high on caffeine. He would just load up and just Red Bull. And so like that was his thing though. Like he just doesn't drink anymore. He just bang, and he'd always be the DD because he's the only guy that wouldn't be drinking. And so like he would be like, yeah, whatever, I'll drive. And he would just load on caffeine. And so like, I mean, some people, I don't know, you can just stop it all. Like I definitely need something just to take the edge off a couple, 1 or 2 days a week where you just get like just something to just sit down and just not give a rat's ass for a minute or two. And so like it's nice to have that layoff on that. But I mean, if it came down to it where you had to, I don't think it'd be too difficult. But
yeah, I just don't. For me, it would be the weed thing. Like the alcohol, yep, I think I could do that. The weed thing would be a lot harder because it moderates my moods and helps me sleep and stuff like that. I don't know. It's an interesting thought process.
Well, bringing in like the thoughts on basically self-medicating or something, that brings us into our first topic.
Microdosing.
Yeah, sure, that one. I don't know if we were going to do microdosing, if we can talk Michael Pollan, they're both kind of tied together.
Yeah. Well, microdosing was a discussion I actually had, weirdly enough, with a friend of mine, and I kind of always shy away from that, right? I shy away from what is microdosing? I mean, come on, like how are hallucinogenics actually good for you? And they talk about it with not just or hallucinogenics. They talk about it with marijuana. Nobody talks about it with alcohol. I guess that's not a thing. But with marijuana, it's a little bit about microdosing. Like if you could do a small amount of CBD oil or THC oil, you could change your mood. But people are talking about right now are actually talking about microdosing acid or mushroom. Yeah. And it's an interesting thought process. And there's a friend of mine whose mother has been microdosing for 5 years now. And
it's the hip thing to do in the West Coast in Silicon Valley. Like it's the edge. It's the thing people are attributing to creativity and problem solving and some of the most creative aspects of the tech world. I mean, it's really popular, aside from the fact that it's still illegal, but it's really popular right now.
Yeah. And I had a friend that was like, hey, if you don't have anything to do tonight, you should try this. And I was like, nope. Like, I don't know what's in there. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know what it is, man. Like I'm 35 now. I don't know if I want to do any of these things. Like alcohol and weed are pretty good for me. I'm that old fogey, I guess. And they're like, no. You don't understand. It's just a microdose. And I'm like, yeah, but if you tell me I've got to clear my whole night, that doesn't sound like a microdose to me.
Yeah, no, like microdosing is not. Yeah, that's higher than a microdose, without question. I don't know. One of my favorite podcasts I listen to, Reply All, they did a microdosing thing where it did multiple days. I think they did a week of it. But the standard on microdosing, so like 100 micrograms is considered that's considered like a base level LSD trip. And I can't remember what the psilocybin level is. I'm not sure if it's the same or not for the mushroom psilocybin content, if that's 100 micrograms or not. I could have swore that was a higher content if you're directly eating the mushrooms, so you'd be into the grams on that. But either way, what people are doing, excuse me, in the microdosing is they're really, really taking very, very, very small amounts. And it's kind of like having a glass of wine or something at breakfast and then another one at lunch and another one at dinner. Like you're not getting much as far as any kind of high or buzz from it. You might be a little lightheaded, a little bit, I guess, freewheeling. But as far as I know, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the episode for the second topic, for the book review for Michael Pollan's book, is that the microdosing thing, what it does is it just kind of changes the way you think a little bit, to the point where you're a little bit more open to certain suggestions and stuff. And there's a few reasons as to why that happens. But the microdosing for LSD is supposed to be something that helps, not so much for people who are just like trying to, try to solve the world's problems and make some kind of new creative endeavor. But they're finding that it's really, really effective when it comes to people that have PTSD and they're alcoholics, as far as changing, the brain chemistry and kind of helping them overcome some things that are really, really difficult. And when your ego becomes something so controlling, that microdosing helps you just kind of forget yourself a little bit and just kind of take your step back. And that's what I've been hearing. So what is the woman that that's taking this? What is she, I guess, doing this for 5 years? I mean, there has to be a medical reason that she's trying to self-medicate.
She has a extremely high, depression rate. So she is basically like a manic depressant.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of it for that too.
She also has fibromyalgia, so she has extreme amounts of pain. She basically can get into a situation where she can't do anything for a whole day, and so she was to the point where everything would just be blah for her. And so in fairness, she doesn't have to work. It's not like she goes to work every day. It's not like she does any of these other things, but this has helped her, and she now can go out. She gardens. She helps take care of the house. She takes care of the dogs and all these other things. And she doesn't think about, self-harm or think about how the world's collapsing as often.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so, again, it's just, it's a little bit different. And so there's a study, and we'll start with an article from Psychedelic Times. And I know that sounds like we're taking a pseudoscience, and I won't say that this whole thing is 100% accurate, but they actually talk about a study that was, done at a university with 21 men, using microdoses. And the study is called Nordic Studies on Alcohol and Drugs. Alcohol and drugs, right?
When was this study done?
The study was done very recently, right? It's not like this study from like 1910. It was actually published last year in 2018. So I would assume that this study was done a year before, maybe 2 years at most, right?
Well, the reason I asked is because there was a huge pre-1950s era of research on the topic. And so there's a lot of people that are rediscovering that old information that was kind of locked away in vaults, and they're rediscovering this research and how effective it is dealing with with alcoholism and a bunch of other stuff. Yes.
And essentially, the study was done for a book from 2011 called the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, right? And you're right, all of this does stem back from the 70s. It really does. That's the original discussion. And the guy that wrote the book, I believe his name is James Fadiman.
Yep, Fadiman.
And so he wrote this book, and his book uses this study, and I think there's like 7 to 10 other studies inside of here where they talk about life-threatening diseases, depressions, life-threatening anxiety, social disorders, psychological disorders, panic attacks, different things like that, and how this use has helped people throughout it. Now, I'll be the first to admit that a study of 21 people is a pretty small sample size, right? It is. And but the idea is this is the beginning of this discussion, right? This is the beginning of how do we get to where we're at today, and how can we start learning from this? And what they did in the study is they took people that were in their 30s who had stable jobs, stable relationship, and they had previous experience with psychedelic drugs. And they encouraged them to do microdoses, and did a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. And this was with LSD, right? And so the idea behind this was to essentially set up and see what the change would be, how it would be inside of adults, and does this enhance creativity, intelligence? Does this enhance anything, or is this essentially, just a
placebo effect?
Yeah, placebo effect. And that's what's interesting, because they found enough results to basically say, hey, this is worth, diving further into. So there's actually more studies that have stemmed from this, and they've collected data. And again, this is just data, and I think we should do an episode. We should go back to this. We cut this part out of another episode we had, but we had talked about in the past looking at the hierarchy of scientific evidence, right, and studies and different things. And the idea here is that while this is probably on some of that lower level studies, you can use this to build a foundation to do further study. So they're collecting data from lots of other people, over 900 people they're collecting from who are using microdoses right now, to get anecdotal data to try and say, hey, is this worth further research or further discussion?
Yeah, that's what it basically is. And so Fadiman is one of the guys that is he's been around for a long time working on this project. He was one of the guys that in the 60s was microdosing and psilocybin research and LSD research was really popular at the time. And there was a guy named Timothy Leary in Harvard who was this eccentric, I would say he was kind of like Richard Dawkins for they didn't call them hallucinogens, they called them psychedelics, but there was a bunch of different names for him. But Timothy Leary was the guy who was basically like a Dawkins or a Hitchens or a Harris, like an outspoken guy out there telling people this was the best thing, this is the greatest thing, this is a major development, the world is going to be better because of this, trying to basically expound the benefits of using psychedelics in treatment. And he pushed the edge of the boundaries. He went to the far edges of it, and it became controversial. And so once these guys who were doing legitimate research heard about Timothy Leary doing the things he was doing at Harvard, there were questions and people were skeptical because he was doing the drugs while his patients were taking these drugs, and they were basically reporting back what was happening. So this would be like the researcher doing the drug with you while you were reporting what was happening. So like there's a bunch of people losing scope of what was actually happening. And so what happened in the 60s and 70s is people lost faith in the system, and then there was a huge scare about LSD and the drug war and stuff, and so they blocked it all out and basically made this thing this incredibly criminal medicine, and they were no longer allowing people to do research on it. This was Schedule 1, keep it away from everyone, and there's no medical benefit. And, it's been a drought for the last 30 years, 40 years. And it finally, with guys like Fadiman, there's a bunch of people who are working on this again, and it's slowly becoming the FDA recently approved a psilocybin for an MDMA medical research platform for people with PTSD. And MDMA is a little bit easier, and they're working with psilocybin and LSD and working on projects for that. But like it's growing again, and so the microdosing stuff, they're doing it illicitly on the West Coast. But I really think it has potential. But once again, we have to treat this like we would any kind of controlled substance or medicine. Like this isn't. None of these things are going to be a panacea, a save everyone from everything. That microdosing won't make you, it's like that Bradley Cooper movie where he took a pill and he had able to use 100% of his brain instead of the myth of 10% BS or whatever. Like microdosing won't make you some kind of guru that will be able to be the next Zuckerberg Facebook creator, but it could do some really great things for some people. And so it's not a panacea, end all be all fix all, but there are some people that microdosing could be a really, really good thing for and help them level off, or in some cases maybe it could be a creative outlet. But we're right at kind of what I would say is a modern research end of doing stuff like this. Like it's finally become to the point where we're the whole country's okay with marijuana again, or for the first time, I guess. And so like moving on to medical testing for these kinds of drugs. I'm super excited about it. I've talked to our friend David Teachout about it. He wants to do they call them assisted trips, where you have a therapist or somebody who would take you on a trip. And he wants to do it because obviously he's a therapist. And I told him if he does it and he learns the ways of being a guide, that I want him to come to Michigan and take me on a trip. And maybe we would do a project for Cellar Door Skeptics where we would both do something like that.
Sure.
You sound skeptical. I'm 100%.
I'm a little skeptical. I'll be honest with you. The microdosing, I'm still even skeptical about that. I get it. I do see the benefits that science talks about. We've been here before to some extent. We're more knowledgeable now in how to do scientific research and studies. We're more knowledgeable now in how things interact with our body. But
we can watch the brain in real time while it's getting it.
You're right. You can. But nobody truly understands, what this is. And I'll be honest, I'm a little cautious of this. I'm pretty cautious of this, given past experiences I've had, and B, some of how we don't understand how this works for everybody. And while microdosing, if it can be genuinely studied in a great environment and we can start having real results come from this, I'm excited for it. The difference is dosing with psychedelics is a lot more harmful in the long run on high doses than, let's say, marijuana is. It'd be like if you were like giving a teenager a bottle of alcohol. Some of them, if they drink it all in one sitting, will live the next day. Some of them will not. Now, you probably won't die from psychedelics. I agree.
No,
with
you
that.
Literally can't. It's the same kind of thing as the THC thing. Is like you cannot overdose on it. But what you can do is you can like be taken so far that you could have some kind of potential damage done to your perspective and your mind. It's one of and then the next topic when we talk about it on Pollan's book is they talk about what it does is the hallucinogenics or the psychedelics, they stimulate your brain and your neural networks. They don't do anything really to your heart or your cardiovascular system at all. So like drugs like MDMA, they deal with partially with your circulatory system. So those can be dangerous. You hear about people taking ecstasy and having heart attacks or having elevated heart rate where they have to go to the hospital and basically be sedated. But the psychedelics, it's a different kind of effect. And so like the overdosing thing isn't so much possible on the psychedelics. But it's something that they don't know exactly what kind of like a maximum dosage would do to your brain. So like
exactly.
if it would
and they don't know what you would do on it either, right? Like we know when you get drunk, you are less capable of understanding what's going on. You're less capable of making rational decisions.
Your inhibitions are reduced.
Yeah. Psychedelics are the same way to some extent. Again, you can't overconsume. I had a buddy that used to take ayahuasca all the time. Thought it was the best thing ever. I never understood why you wanted to vomit after you took a drug, but that's just me.
Apparently, there's a different kind of ayahuasca that you can take. It's in a short-term form where you actually you smoke it like you would a crack in a crack pipe, and you get a high. It's a 30-minute high, and it'll take you off into space, and you come right back in. Once again, all of these things are in Michael Pollan's book that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But like, I don't know too many people that have done the ayahuasca beer, which is basically the tea that you're talking about, where it's two different plants that are made into a tea. And some people get really, really sick from it. Some people don't. And then once you puke up at all the guts and stuff, then you go high. Is that what he was doing?
Yes. Yep, that's exactly what he was doing. So, well, and again, like I said, I'm not.
But these are all like larger doses. Like the microdosing, though, I don't know. I think it has some possibility.
Yep. And as we leave this topic, the last thing, there was a study that was done in February of this year, and they call it a systematic study of microdosing psychedelics. And we're not going to talk about the study. I think we've exhausted this topic a lot, but if you want to read, and the whole study is online, you can literally read the whole study for free. But it actually talks about discussing with 98 participants this time over a longer period of time, over a period of like 6 weeks, where they take over 63 doses of, between each other of microdosing, and they actually dissect it, and they have figures, they have methods, they do 2 different studies on it, and it's really interesting. So if you want to know more about this topic specifically, then check out a systematic study of microdosing by Vince Polito and Richard Stevenson. But for us, I think we've had enough about microdosing, and you're right. In fairness, maybe if David Teachout comes and wants to do that, I'll be on board for an adult night.
With David, we would be talking about going on a full trip. So David read the book that I wanted to talk about, which would be the next topic. Did you want to? Are we going to take a commercial break at all?
No, we are commercial free for this episode.
I just wanted to make sure. So we got this topic here, which is Michael Pollan's book. Michael Pollan, also known from The Omnivore's Dilemma, and another one of his book is The Argument for I believe it's The Argument for Food. But his new-ish book, reviewed best book of 2018, How to Change Your Mind, what the new science of psychedelics teaches us about consciousness, dying, addiction, depression, and transcendence. It's 465 pages. I recommend it highly. I finished the book last week. I've been essentially reading through it and listening to the audiobook. He actually reads as well, which I recommend for anyone that's getting an audiobook, is to actually find one where the author reads it to you, because they understand the inflection of their voice and what they were trying to say. It makes a huge difference in the way the book reads. Because I'm listening to another of his books that's read by Scott Brick, I believe his name, and he is a professional audiobook reader, but the way he announces everything and reads everything, he's like the most I don't know, like confident reader I've ever heard. So everything sounds almost like presumptuous and aggressive. But anyways, in this book, Michael Pollan, essentially, he taken psychedelics in the form of psilocybin multiple times in his youth. And he had one bad trip on marijuana where he was worried that he was going to have to call a hospital to come pick him up because he was basically loaded. But other than that, he dove into the research into these things. And so the book is broken up into multiple sections, and he goes into the research of what in the past, and that's what I was talking about earlier about him talking about in the 1900s there were people who essentially went to Mexico and they tested psilocybin. They were white people who went to native Mexican villages, and these villages had been taking psilocybin to have religious experiences, and they were going down, and this guy Watson, I believe was his last name, he convinced him to allow him to test it, and he was allowed to take the medicine. And when he did, this is where they were as far as the United States at this time. His story, his write-up about the experience, was cover page of Time magazine. That's what this country thought about for psychedelics. He said this is this new amazing thing that allows us to come to contact with God, to become one with the universe. And it was the cover of Time magazine. And psychedelics and psilocybin and LSD, I don't believe had been synthesized and been taken yet at that point. But like the country thought it was this new amazing thing, just much like cocaine was this great thing in the United States, until they realized that it could be snorted for a super high, and they started removing it from, soda and stuff. So like he basically goes through the history of psychedelics in the book, and he breaks down a bunch of the people that were involved, and that's where you learn about people in the original times, which this was the gentleman who went into Mexico, and you learn about the original guy who synthesized LSD and how he originally created it, and he didn't think it was useful at all. and he put it on a shelf for years, and somehow he was working with it again, and he accidentally got some on his hand or ingested it, and he got super high. He basically went home and he was like, I'm losing my mind. I have to get home. I have to get to my house. He got to his house and he basically went on a full trip into the universe, and he wrote down exactly what happened. And he's the father of LSD. I believe there's a conference every year on his birthday where LSD like scientists talk about the stuff. So like he breaks down what everything is in the history of it and how popular and useful it was, and the research that they were doing. And so like that's where that PTSD, microdosing, and alcoholism, like these were the first things. It wasn't PTSD, it was shell shock at the time, but these were the things that they were doing, and it was considered a legitimate scientific research. And if you hadn't taken the medicine before you were experimenting with it, you were considered a naive researcher, and that you didn't know what you were doing. You actually had to have the experience before you were able to experiment with people to try to see whether or not this was a project or a medicine that could be useful. I mean, that's what the past of this country has with these kinds of medicines. I was blown away by that.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to the book, the write-up of it is they talk about, why do people take drugs, right? What's the point of taking drugs? They're fun. Right? Drugs are fun until they're not fun. But psychedelics are a little bit different. And I do agree with them to some extent. Like, I won't say I've never done psychedelics before. And, I've never had an addiction ever to psychedelics. I never woke up thinking, man, I really want to take more LSD or more
I don't think I've ever heard of a case where either of those are addictive. I don't know if that is a property, really, to be honest with you. I know people that really like the feeling, but I don't think it has the same kind of addictive qualities. I guess over time, on regular use, it could, but I've never seen something where psychedelics have it. So that would be a surprise to me. If anyone knows if it has those properties, but I don't remember hearing anything in the book where there was something like that. In fact, I remember them saying probably that it was more likely that's it's counteractive to it, because it's used to help people with addiction, to help kind of break open the whole idea of ego. So anyways.
Yeah. And essentially Pollan talks about and argues that anxieties are misplaced when it comes to psychedelics. Most are not addictive, right? So you don't have the same addiction that you can get. And again, I've had some bad experiences, in fairness, and I'm not all the way through the book personally yet either. But yeah, I've had some bad experiences. I had an experience very young where a friend and I took...
Yeah, you were out and about. Like, you were out in the world, yeah.
Yep, we took a small amount, and then the guy we took it from was like, hey, just, you can have as much as you want. They're free. Because they don't, like, cocaine instantaneously hits you. Marijuana hits you very quickly. Like, at some point, you're able to, like, gauge. Even alcohol, to some extent, you're able to gauge. Like, if you were to down a fifth, that would be different. But, like, if you're just having large drinks, after a couple of them, you're like, holy crap, I'm out of it. And you can either stop or not. You can make a bad decision or a good decision, right?
Yeah.
And that's just, with psychedelics, it doesn't work like that. When they hit, it starts and it doesn't stop. And the experience I had was, when it kicked in, I was listening to Fish. I was in this car. I wasn't driving. This guy was driving us. And I thought everything was melting and then growing, and then everything was purple. And I loved purple for whatever reason. And everything was. And then the next thing you know, we're parking in Grand Haven. And then next thing you know, I got to walk 2 miles to go see fireworks. And then the guy decided to take us through this crowd where everybody's sitting down. And I thought all their legs were tan snakes that were writhing. And I had to, like, figure out how to get through them. And that was freaky.
you have a snake phobia.
Yeah, I do. And then, we sit down and I can't figure out what's going on. And then this kid next to me goes, hey, what's going on? I thought he said, hey, isn't that cool? And I look at him like, yeah, that's really cool, man. And there's this 12-year-old like, dude, What's wrong with you? And his dad looks at me. He's like, what the fuck's wrong with you, man? Like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, this is really cool. Well, what had happened next to me was somebody was mocking this 12-year-old, and some other guys stuck up for him, and they got in a fight. And there's like this physical fight next to me. And
you're like, that's cool, man.
Yeah, like I don't know what the hell is going on. You know, like it's just like, yeah.
Someone's punching a toddler. You're like, yeah, that's cool, man.
Well, they didn't punch the toddler. Somebody else stuck up for him in the family. But still, you know, like I'm not even in reality.
So basically, that entire experience and everything that you got there, like all of those things that you just described, are all of the things they tell you not to do when you take psychedelics. Every single thing you just said is what they say. So essentially what they say is that the time when you take psychedelics, one, it should be a buddy system. So the other person there's a set of ground rules that there is no sexual contact. There is no the person that's guiding you should not be taking any of this medicine with you. You guys should set a basic set of ground rules and the things that you want to hear as far as music is concerned. All those kinds of things. Basically, you need to plan out a trip, and it needs to be a 2-person or multiple person. Because what they do is sometimes they'll have a guide who guides multiple people in a group setting. That's typically how ayahuasca is done. But what it needs to be is essentially the setting is almost as important as the drug itself. And so when you take the medicine, essentially it breaks you open, cracks you open like an egg to, you know, the universe and the world and everything. But the setting that you're in and the guidance that you get makes a huge difference as to what's going on. So they did tests, and they talk about it in the book, that people were being giving this medicine, and they were being giving this medicine in like a psychiatric, a therapist's office. And so you're in an office, it's a warm office, there's nice things on the walls, you're on a couch, you're in a chair, the guy's in it, or the therapist is on the other side talking to you, guiding you. You say something and a lot of times they wear eye shades, so you cover your eyes so you're not looking at too much, and your mind kind of takes you out. Otherwise the things that you look at will influence your trip. And like everything needs to be planned and controlled, and they really need to do something. And they say that there's multiple things that you should do when you're on your trips. Is that if you see something really scary or really dangerous, when you're in, you know, obviously when you're high, you should not run away from it, because that will turn your trip into a horrendous, horrifying monster trip. But you should stand up to a trip. And so, like, let's say a giant monster appears. You should look at it and you should say, why are you here? Why are you in my mind? And then a lot of times these kinds of manifestations will explain themselves to you through your trip, as to like this one woman basically said that she was so scared of dying and leaving her friends and family behind, and that cancer would return, that she lived her life in this state of paralysis. She took psilocybin, she had this thing, and she went on the trip and she saw this monster, but it was like this black thing in her body where her cancer was before it went into remission, and she saw it, and she basically like removed it, told it to go away, destroyed it or whatever, and it removed her fear about dying or the cancer returning, and it actually increased her quality of life. And so like they say that doing those kinds of confrontational things and the way you go about it, like planning your trip, makes a huge difference. And so one of the things that they talk about is like a lot of the times you hear about any of these psychedelics and having bad trips and basically being these uncontrollable things, is that the setting and the control and what's happening is almost, if not as important as the actual drug itself that takes you on the trip. And that's what basically what he's talking about in this book, is like what these things are doing and how and why you should be doing it in this way. And that's one of the things that makes it way more constructive than what we typically do with, you know, tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana, is that those essentially are drugs that just wherever, whatever, the high is basically the same. You might get some different variations from where you are, but the people you're with and the setting you're in won't affect it too much. It's a chemical reaction. But since your brain is so affected by these drugs, it's a different kind of place that it takes you to. And one of the things that there's a thing called the default mode network, the DMN, that they reference multiple times in the book. And this is one of two things that I really wanted to talk about on this contact, or the book here, is that this network is one of the major networks in your brain that at first they believed was just kind of your brain in wakeful rest. So like when you're just sitting there like daydreaming, mind wandering, they believe this was the part of your brain that did that. But it's now known that it can contribute more to like elements of the experience that are related to external task performance. So what they're talking about is like when the individual or the person is thinking about other people instead of thinking about themselves, or they're remembering the past or planning in the future. So time related things, or thinking about, external things outside of your ego, things away from you, and then planning time back, time forward, time reverse. That is all done in the default mode network. What they find is that psilocybin and LSD amplify your default mode network. They drive it to they basically set aside all of the other cerebral cortex portions that are essentially responsible for all of your complex thinking, your hierarchy, and your ego, all the things that make you, and they shut those off. And so that you and your default mode network become one with basically the universe. You're basically reduced to a state of zero, and so that it can allow your brain to essentially look at the universe not from the sense of self, from me and an individual and the rest of the world, because we talked about this as non-believers, that we're all stardust and we're just the physical manifestations of stars exploding, and whether or not you're materials or not, the brain is essentially just an incredibly complex machine or series of chemical combinations that believes that it understands and knows itself, whether or not consciousness is any kind of outside the standard realm of physics or not, or just a really, 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 really complex computer that we can't quite make yet. All of these things we don't really understand that, and so we don't understand why default mode network and psilocybin and LSD take us to this place, or people to this place where you feel like you're one and connected with the entire universe. It essentially breaks away your ego. But that is part of what helps people with addiction, is that you see the uselessness and the futility of what does getting high really mean when you look at the universe and the whole. And so he's like trying to go through that and see why and how and what, and deal with the neurology and the neuroscience that's connected to these things as to why these things can happen. And it's a really enjoyable thing for people who are a little bit on the science edge of stuff. But like me, I'm skeptical of this, like, I was one with the universe and the whole thing. And I mean, I'm skeptical of why that, that seems so new age and so, hokey. But like he tries to bring in some scientific reasoning as to why the brain, because humans are, 99% identical, like why the brain is doing this, and why we can almost predictively create a scenario where the people have these kinds of mystical experiences. And it scares me a little bit, because I want to do this, but I don't want to turn into a freaking new age guru that, like they say, some people have life-changing experiences, and that's a bit scary. But the idea that there's like some kind of neuroscience thing, like the Sam Harris idea of like the brain and why you do what you do, and Dan Dennett, the brain and why you do what you do. Like, I love the idea that science may potentially have a neuroscientific explanation for this kind of stuff. And maybe this could help us find the root to consciousness. I mean, this was a really interesting book that talked about some of those things. I thought it was really, really fun to kind of go into. I didn't think that LSD and psilocybin would be the way that I would read about some of these topics, but I mean, I thought it was really interesting. I'm terrified of it, but I do think one day I will try it out, because Michael Pollan did it when he was 60, I believe, is when this book was written. He was 60 years old when he was doing it, so he was worried about his health, but he forged ahead, and he had some really amazing experiences, guided properly by the people that he trusted.
Yeah, and one of the things I found interesting that in the book so far was they discuss that default mode that you were talking about, that babies and children are in this.
They start there, yeah.
That's how they start, right? And it's interesting to say, if you can go back to there using some sort of a hallucinogen to get you back there, you can progress back to when you were younger to some extent, right? And then, like they give the comparison he does where babies and children are basically tripping all the time. And it's like, well, that's weird to think about, but if you look at maybe not
how
baby,
open they are,
but if you look at my daughters and different things like that when they're younger, some of the things they did, you go, if I were on acid, I would do that. like when I actually sat down and looked through old pictures and things, it's like, all right, I get why you just did that. That's genius. Now I understand that, and my daughter can draw things that like I've never even conceived of. And, she does all those things because of probably that default as she's coming out of there, but some of that just lingers. And what would be even more interesting study is if we could figure out when default mode starts to turn off to some extent, right? And if you think about
when the ego takes over and the default mode is just kind of on in the background most of the time.
Yeah. And that would be an interesting study to see, how does it range? Is there a way to extend it? Do you have memories from your default mode? All these different things. To me, that all just opens up the possibility of study. And I don't even say that, to say, hey, as a 35-year-old or 36-year-old, we should start taking hallucinogens on guided journeys to hit default mode to test this out. I'm saying, how can we figure out how to identify this in children without harming them and start studying them? Because that default mode may be a way to help extend life, maybe a way to help people move past incredibly traumatic situations. I don't know. It's just
that's part of the research. That's part of the research they're doing. There's basically that they're removing the ego, the sense of individuality, which a lot of people think, it's a really great thing. But when you think about the ego and what it changes and what it does, it's like he talked about multiple times in the book, right before he was getting ready to go on a trip. The next day, he would have doubts and doubts and doubts. And you could feel his ego eating away at him, like, this isn't a good idea. You shouldn't do this. We really shouldn't do this. One, he says, because the ego itself becomes this thing that is like this control freak in your life. And that the default mode network is more like something that's just like, we're going to do this. Let's see where we go. And so like the ego fights with the default mode network basically for control to a certain degree. And that babies and children haven't completely developed that ego yet. They haven't developed that sense of self, that barrier that we set up. And so one of the things that I thought was really cool about this, we talk about this from time to time on the show, is that one of the reasons why we think that the human brain does what it does a lot of times and makes these really short, assumptive decisions about a lot of things that we run into in the world is that we simply could not process all of the information that comes in through all five of our senses at all times. So the brain basically takes bits and pieces, makes an educated decision, and moves on because you couldn't handle it. Your brain simply couldn't handle all of that sensory information all at once. And the default mode network, man, I apologize. But the default mode network, it basically is a little bit more open and able to deal with that. But also with the psilocybin stuff, it kind of turns off some of the filters in the simulatory software that our brain has. It says like, okay, we think this is this, stop paying attention to it. And it lets a lot of this really, really raw information in so that you experience the world like you do when you're a child, where everything is amazing and awe-inspiring and wondrous and infinite and bright and colorful. And that is a world that I really do think that a lot of people who are so wound up about whether or not, this administration is going to destroy the planet and this administration is going to restore the planet, like, basically, what I'm talking about is that the idea of the DMN is allowing people to break themselves back to that early perspective, like we said with the children, the universe, the world, and all. Is that these kinds of experiences could help bring people back from that massive sense of ego. And he says right in here, you don't necessarily need drugs to enter this strange egoless realm of consciousness. Near-death experiences, meditation, and fasting can get you there too. There's a scene in the book where he does a series of breathing exercises, and he gets fully psychedelically high from those breathing exercises. You need to be young and relatively fit in order to do this, because he actually had heart arrhythmia problems when he was doing this, and so he was worried. But there are a variety of ways so that people can access this part of your brain and these kinds of experiences without the psychedelics. that you hear people like near death experiences and stuff. Like there is a way to do this stuff and access these things from time to time. And the book talks about a variety of ways to do this and the benefits of all those ways. And that's kind of what I thought was really cool about this book, is that it's kind of like what are all the possibilities?
Exactly. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. It was a great read that I was able to have, and I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting concept.
I'm super excited to see if the research turns into anything in the future. I don't know.
Fair enough. Well, as we close the show out, we always do quick saves. So I thought it would be interesting, to talk a little bit about these. You had an interesting one this week. You had one that was called "How to Maintain a Cast Iron Grill." I
am a cast iron lover right now. I got a full set. I have a Dutch oven, a whole bunch of skillets, size small, big. I think my biggest is I have it's a 12-inch, 2-inch deep skillet, and about seasoning skillets properly, having a good, semi sort of non-stick coating on them, and how great and well they cook. And I mean, this is something that as part of my cooking experience has grown. I love it. And this is the best. It's a JPEG. It's a picture. The best description instruction manual I have ever found of how to maintain and to properly season your cast iron with all of the best ways, including the oils and the way that you do it, how you heat it, and how many times you should do it to make sure your cast iron is smooth, slick, black as it should be. I highly recommend it. Also, just for anyone out there who doesn't have any cast iron, don't be scared of it. It's really cool stuff, because even if you screw it up, all you got to do is just give it a Scotch-Brite rub down and put some oil on it, throw it back into your oven, and you put a new season on it, and you're good to go. So, like, you can't screw it up. The only thing you could do is put it in your dishwasher, and then you would rust it to hell, and then it would be a nightmare. But other than that, get yourself some cast iron and get away from all that cancer-inflicting Teflon DuPont crap.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of funny, and it's kind of funny. My buddy, he has a cabin up north and all that. He actually started investing in a lot of cast iron. I don't have a lot. I have a small amount. Just they're fajitas dishes. That right. My
so
family
good.
buys that for me just because they were fajita dishes, so I can make authentic fajitas.
Mm-hmm.
But when we moved into this house, I have the stove top. All of the stove fixtures are cast iron, and so I have this griddle like thing that goes in the middle of my stove with a burner. And
I
it's actually
wish
really cool.
I had one.
It's like during the summer, during the winters, I can actually grill steaks on it.
Hell yeah. Yeah, you got the raised surfaces, so you can do grill marks or whatever on it.
Yeah. I have one that has different variations of it.
Yeah, dude. I wish I had one of those. I have one that's got Teflon coating on that I got. It's not the Lodge or whatever cast iron, but dude, it's such a nice even way to heat, because the whole thing heats up so much that whatever you put on there, it isn't where the fire is. It just heats so good.
Yeah, exactly. And my buddy was all for all of this, and I don't know. I kind of was like, oh, well, I'll look into this. I don't know. I'll look into this, and I think I'll probably buy more. But I have a lot of that cored steel, so a lot of my stuff is like a copper core that has multiple cores in it, and those have lasted me forever. And I have over 80% of my dishes are that way.
Yeah, that stuff is better than the Teflon coating stuff. Like that stuff, people have a tendency to cook too hot. So like if you have a flame heat on your pot and on your range, and you cook your food on Teflon on high, you're essentially burning the Teflon off and into your food. And DuPont says, like, don't eat this stuff You should not eat this stuff. This is like PFAS. This will give you cancer. It's like for Teflon coatings, copper coated pans, you're supposed to cook those on relatively low heat and let the heat dissipate. And most people just like with Teflon, they're like, just crank it, and you just fire it up full blast. Like if you're full blast firing, you need like stainless, and even that gets tough. I don't know. This is the cool picture. This is the best thing I've seen for heating and seasoning cast iron. And like I've been trying to find a really great way to do it and to know the right way to do it, because I had a couple of screw ups where I had to 2, 3, 4 times try to figure it out. And this one, there's no question this works.
Yep, I would agree. My quick save of the week, and it's not really, I don't know, it's just what has Tanner been listening to? We talk about death metal, we talk about all these things. I keep going back, and it's like every week for whatever reason.
It's the new Carly Rae Jepsen album. I know.
No, it's definitely not. It's MXPX. For whatever reason, I go back and I listen to my MXPX albums all the time.
That's good
I don't know
stuff,
why.
man.
I just don't know why. Like I can't help myself.
So what songs are you going into?
What songs? Actually, I've been I've been listening to their newer stuff, which I didn't even know that they existed for a long time, because I stopped listening to punk music and all of that for a while. And all of a sudden, I just came back to it, and their newest album is self-titled again for whatever weird reason, right? Like why they want to continue to do that is beyond me. But they have, their newest album is called MXPX, and it's actually really, really, really good. And but I was listening to it, my wife was like, "You do know they have no substance to their lyrics?" And I was like,
"Bullshit.
I don't care. I'm here. This is really good. I like this." But my favorite album, the one I go back to the most, is Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. I don't know why. It's from 98, right? But I've listened to that album probably I don't know. I probably listened to that album 100, 200 times, now. I don't know. Just, that's what, that I don't have another quick save. My quick save that's what I've been listening to pretty much on repeat, at least once a week for the last 6 months.
Yeah, MXPX, dude, the lead singer, I believe, is Mike Herrera. The band is awesome. They talk about essentially, they used to be Christian punks, and now they're, at least the lead singer himself is a non-believer, and there's some really cool videos and stuff that they talked about. One of the Vans Warped Tour, I believe one of their songs is Separation of Church and Skate. Yeah. And that's one of my favorite songs they have on there. Some of their albums, it's really good stuff. Watching, essentially their belief dribble down and doubt take over. If you look at their history of all their music, it's a really awesome coming out story, in my opinion. I think MXPX is a great group, and their punk it's iconic. It's very simplistic, but it's badass.
I would agree. Well, thank you all so much for joining us in another Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you for going through Hannah's coughs, because he can't seem to control himself. It's all that cocaine he's been doing. But we'll be back next week.
I blame it on mushrooms.
Not mushrooms. We'll be back next week with another amazing Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all for joining us, and have an amazing night.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.